Welcome to Talent Matters, the podcast where talent, skills and grit take centre stage. I'm your host, Donal O'Donoghue, and this is episode 12. The podcast is sponsored by Sanderson, talent solutions that transform businesses globally, and Finero, the multi-award-winning tax experts who support financial success for contractors, freelancers and solopreneurs. In this episode, I'm delighted to be joined by Eric Donovan, former European super featherweight champion, and Eric's got a great story to tell, and glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Donal. Yeah,
it's a pleasure.
Yeah.
So tell us, we always like to start off on the podcast in terms of how it all began. Where did you grow up? What was life like for you when you were a young fella?
Yeah, so I'm from Athy in County Kildare, Lillywhite.
That's because what was the boxing name? It was the
Lillywhite
Lightning.
The Lillywhite Lightning, yeah. I'll tell you actually the story behind that now in a few minutes, but yeah, from Athy in County Kildare, yeah. So that's where I grew up. I grew up in a place called Clamullion, which is a big, housing estate, and just a good environment to grow up in. Like, back in the 80s, 90s, during my childhood and my early teenage years, huge families, very populated area. Everybody knew each other, and everybody was kind of like in and out of each other's houses. Kind of a lot different than today, a bit more community feel to it, like. But yeah, got up to plenty of devilment there as a youngster, but
bit of a tearaway.
Yeah, it was good. It was very, I suppose, best way to describe it would be dysfunctional upbringing. But good memories.
Yeah. What stage did you get involved in the boxing? Because you were young, weren't you?
Yeah. So I followed my two older brothers down to the local boxing club. I was only 7 years old. It was in an old nuns' hall on the outskirts of the estate that I grew up in, and I never forget it. I remember my first day walking in there. I just loved everything about it. It's like I found some, a place where I could really channel all of this emotional and mental kind of energy that I had and turmoil into something constructive and positive. Because other areas of my life weren't really that stable, let's say. School wasn't no emphasis on education. As I said, growing up in a family, but come from a very loving family, but it's quite dysfunctional. My mum and dad separated when I was only a child, so that brought, I'm a married man and I have children, so can imagine it must be hard. That was back in the 80s, so it must have been very, very difficult. But never had them kind of conversations, just got on with things.
How old were you when your folks separated?
I was only a baby. I was only a baby, yeah. But that was it. You just kind of got on with life, and Mum done her best. And but the boxing club, I found, for me, when you're growing up, when you're coming from a working class environment, education and sport are, they're crucial. And if you don't have a good education, you need something that's going to give you a bit of direction and structure in your life. And that's what boxing did for me. It kind of worked as an intervention for me, a very positive intervention. But so many times I rebelled against it and rebelled against life. And just, I experienced a couple of traumatic events in my life, or traumatic experiences, that kind of sent me on a bit of a wild trajectory, but the boxing club was where I kept going back to. When I say I kept going back to it, there was times where I ran away from it, but I had a great coach.
That's so important, isn't it?
I can't tell you, I can't stress how much coaches, people are like volunteers, could be a teacher, could be coach, could be parent, whatever. Just the impact they make on youngsters in society is just, it's invaluable. Yeah. And it would be very difficult to even quantify it, because the service that they provide to Ireland, to the whole society across the whole country, is it's just, they're the unsung heroes. It's incredible.
Yeah, and it is.
I had a good one.
You hear the story so many times, don't you? When people, get on the wrong track, or they fall out of the gym, and the coach makes the effort to get you back involved. I know I certainly had that when I was younger, and probably the same for yourself.
Yeah. I said Dom O'Rourke was his name, and great boxing man, great community man, and he's just done a lot of good work, and Dom didn't have to kind of pursue me or follow me, but like there was times where I just went missing. I didn't want to box any. I didn't want to I didn't want the hard work, the sacrifice, see, that takes effort, and that takes a lot of a bit of hardship, and a bit of suffering too. Like, and when you're a youngster and you've temptations in your life, you want to sometimes experience that or dip the toe in there. And the more I kind of got of that antisocial behavior or going down the wrong avenue or wrong road, drinking, smoking, that kind of stuff. The two environments were loggerheads,
Yeah.
But that's where you needed someone to kind of like really, really kind of not give up on you.
Yeah.
And Dom was like that. He didn't give up on me, and so grateful for that, because eventually I got to a stage where penny dropped.
Yeah.
And and I was able to kind of, I suppose, save myself.
Yeah. And we've talked about it a couple of times on the podcast recently, the role that a really good coach, sports coach, or a really good teacher can have in actually showing you a path, and then how destructive it can be because I remember, when I was in primary school, we had some teachers who weren't the nicest and didn't treat some of the kids in the class so well, and you could see how they just disconnected from education based on that kind of thing. But it's so important. So what the early aptitude then, it was all about, did you realize early on when with the few people that you were training with, did you realize that you had an early aptitude or an early talent?
I knew very early on that I had something different, like kind of a special talent or ability, because you start boxing competitively at 11 years of age, and I mean I was 14 or 15 in the game before I even lost a fight, so
were you completely obsessed as a kid?
I was. I loved it. I really enjoyed it. But the thing was, there was also other areas of my life that was just becoming a bit like, it was difficult. It was difficult for me to find, I suppose, the only thing that was consistent in my childhood was the dysfunction. So it was very hard for me to be consistent with things. Like I would go really hammer and tongue for a while, do really, really well, and then I would fall by the wayside, fall through the cracks, because I didn't really have the, I suppose, the tools to deal with the emotional and mental turmoil that was going on in my life. And you use what is available to you at that time, so when drugs and drink and all that kind of behavior kind of came into my environment, it's not like I was an innovator or leader or anything. I was a follower. I was a sheep. I wanted to be involved, I'm not saying like, I just was center stage with that kind of stuff, and what it done was it took me away from the I suppose the uncomfortable experiences of my life, the feelings, the emotions.
Yeah.
And so in some ways it provided a respite from that kind of stuff.
Yeah. You often hear that, don't you? I suppose where I'm going with this is that with something like the training and boxing is tough, and the discipline is tough, and when you're a teenager, all you want is kind of acceptance from the peer group, isn't it? Like that's the main driver in the teenage years, and it's very hard to be the only one that's going training a few nights a week if everyone else is hanging out in street corners and drinking cans. Or
that's it. That's true. I was very lucky. I had a guy grow up across the road from me, Roy Sheen. We were best friends as kids, and to our early teenage years, and boxing. We boxed for Ireland together. And he was across the road, and he was multiple Irish champion as well. And so we were so lucky, like, because there was times when I'd kind of be kind of slacking and Roy be going, and then, you'd go on them because he'd be going, and then vice versa. Like, so I was lucky in that way. But to be honest with you, boxing kind of consumed me to the level of it became my identity. It was everything, like Eric the boxer.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I got into it wasn't probably until my 30s, late 20s, 30s, that I discovered I'm much more than a boxer. But I used to live my life through that kind of prism almost, through that lens.
Yeah.
And the outcome of a boxing match, a tournament, the result would determine everything, my well-being, my happiness. And that was a terrible amount of pressure to put onto somebody. And the reason for that was because I felt like it was the only credibility that I had, because it was where I was getting my most enjoyment, and it was where I was getting my most it's where I was successful.
Yeah.
Other areas I was just lost.
Yeah.
I was lost. But it took time, and that's we I hear these conversations all the time about young men, women even, that could have been this, could have been that, or they were great boxers, great footballers, could have played for Ireland, could have played for Kildare, that kind of stuff. And whatever, life grabbed them, and or the unsavoury kind of pleasures of life grabbed them and took a hold of them and disrupted their trajectory or whatever, So I hear them stories all the time, but that's why I speak, and I'm a guest speaker, a motivational speaker, and I want to talk about these subjects, these issues. I know they can be sensitive at times for some people, but not for me, not anymore. I embrace my vulnerability. I love it. It's like a superpower for me. And I stand up and I tell people how it was. And that was just the experiences of my life. And if I'm after coming through all of that, like let's say I navigated my way through it all, what good is it if I don't pass on or share the learnings along the way to help somebody else?
And it's a little bit like what your boxing coach did for you in terms of keeping you on the right track, and you're just doing it at a higher volume, at a higher level now. Talk us through some of the highs and lows of the boxing career before we move on to life after boxing.
Oh, well, I mean, like, I travelled the world with boxing. Like, how could you know what I mean? Like, coming from where I come from, you don't get to do that. People don't get to do that. Travel the world, represent your country. Like, I was laughing about this one day. Like, I've been to over 40 countries. I remember being in the Philippines in 2005, and we're in the training camp for the World Championships in China. And my mate Roy Sheen, myself and Roy Sheen were on this. Two guys from the estate were on a 5-man team. The other 3 members was Conor Ahern from Dublin, and Darren Sutherland, Lord mercy on him, and Kenneth Egan. So we'd 5 men on the team, and I says to Roy, here's Roy, I said, me and you, 2 lads from a council estate in Thai, we're 40% of this Irish boxing team.
It's mad, isn't it?
We just started laughing. But that's what boxing does. It gives people, from marginalised communities, wherever, it gives people a chance. You can walk into any boxing club and find people from all walks of life. You can have men, women, member from the travelling community, member from the African community, member from ethnic minorities, all under one roof doing the same thing as the one team. You don't have any other sport in the world that would do that. Boxing does that, and it's incredible. But that was the highs, travelling around the world. But as an amateur, the biggest high for me was winning the European bronze medal in 2010 in Moscow, because, the major competitions are the Europeans, the Worlds, and the Olympics. And to be a major medal winner is a great thing, and you're in the history books. And that was my highest achievement. My lowest was not making the London Olympics because of an incident that happened outside of the ring, breaking my left hand. That was devastating. But looking back now, all of these things that happened to me along the way were the contributing factors to make my mind, the most resilient mind and the strongest heart. Like, everything in my life up to this point now has made me, like, I feel like the strongest human being I possibly can be. It's great. Like, I embrace all of it. Like, and I don't try to disconnect from it. There was a time where I would have been embarrassed, ashamed, stuff like that. But no, I use all of that now as an asset. I'm proud of it. I come through all of that, and I'm able to stand here, and I'm top of my Everest. I reached my Everest when I won that European title. Yeah. And that was for me the pinnacle of my career at 37. And I brought a lot of people on the journey with me. I brought corporate companies that got in behind me, because people liked my story, not so much as in like the downhill experiences of it, but it was the honesty and the authenticity of it, and the redemption side of it, that no matter what you went through or no matter what you've gone through, you can turn it around. Yeah. And I think we need more of them stories, especially today.
So important. Talk to us a little bit about fear and how you manage fear, because like boxing's a tough sport.
Yeah.
And no matter how long you train in combat sports, fear is something you've got to manage. Talk to us about how you did that, because I suppose there's two reasons for it. I'm interested in how you manage that, but I'd love to see then how you've transitioned that courage into your life after boxing. So when you think back to managing those butterflies and self-doubt and fear, how did you do that?
It's experience, experience helps you with all of that. But doesn't matter how long you're around. The fear I had even in my last fight was just as prevalent as it was when I was a young kid. But if I went into a fight and I had no fear, I'd be very worried. I probably wouldn't get into the ring. Fear is a very healthy emotion, and people need to be able to learn how to embrace it. Like, there's a quote, courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is the ability to proceed in spite of fear. And that's what it was like with me. For so many years in my childhood and my teenage years, I was a closed book. I wouldn't talk to people. My default setting was like, yeah, grand, how are you? Not too bad. But I didn't have the words. I wasn't able to articulate what's going on for me. Today I can. So, that's how I would proceed. But I always tried to disconnect from the uncomfortable feelings. I only had two feelings, up or down. I didn't have much more than that. You're happy or sad. Or you know what I mean? Maybe anger in there as well. But there's so many emotions that we're made up of. We have a repertoire of emotions in our body. And they're all indicators, and they're all healthy things. They're all healthy emotions. They're healthy if we can use them in a healthy way and try not to avoid them, or try not to act out on them, or try not to quash them or ignore them or suppress them, this kind of stuff. And that's what I was doing, disconnect them from them most of my life. But today I embrace them. I make friends with the emotions in my body. And I learn and I explore and I discover. Like, the last few years of my life has been about discovering Eric, the human being. Like, even my I suppose my venture into a third level education and learning about counselling and psychotherapy, and
which is fantastic, because you left school early.
No education, and none. I used to think that I was stupid, basically. Thought I was inadequate, didn't think I had the ability, didn't think I was good enough. And it's amazing what you realize, it's amazing the stories you tell yourselves. This is very, very important, that we should be kind, we should be supportive, we should be compassionate to ourselves, because you can very easily become your own worst enemy. And that's what I was, not good enough. And that's why boxing took such a center stage in my life, even though it did work boxing was a savior for me, it really was. But, I hung everything on boxing.
Yeah,
I hung everything on boxing, but it wasn't until afterwards, or after my career, that I realised that the boxing skills that I've learned are transferable into other areas of life.
Yeah,
and that's another thing. People need, just because you haven't had a good primary or secondary education, doesn't mean you're not capable. The conditions have to be right. If the flower doesn't blossom, don't blame the flower. Blame the environment.
Yeah.
So, as time progressed and the environments that I started to gravitate towards were a lot healthier, were a lot more promising, then I began to flourish.
And did you need to, so when you retired from professional sport, and that door kind of closes on your identity, that's often a difficult time. I mean, you mentioned Darren Sutherland, and there's been plenty of people who are fantastic athletes who suffer terribly with the transition to, maybe it's their identity, maybe it's other underlying issues. But how was it for you when you had to kind of close the door on your identity as the boxer and find the next chapter?
See, I retired twice. Okay, I retired at 28. I spent a year in Kazakhstan boxing in the World Series of Boxing out there. When I got home, I kind of retired because I didn't have anything. I had nothing. And
what do you
what
mean?
I mean
Like
is
the
I had
hunger
no
was
job.
gone,
Well, I had no job. I had no funding anymore. I wasn't number one in Ireland anymore. And I kind of realised, 28, I had two young boys under the age of 10. And where do I go from here? I gave up all my put all my eggs in one basket with boxing career. And then when you realise your funding's gone, you're not number one anymore, you're not in pole position, and you realise then that, like, you know, you're expendable, like, you know, and you're disposable. So I kind of had to take control and try and do something that's going to bring a bit more security into my life. And that's when I opened my mind to the possibility of re-educating myself. And I had so much fear, because the fear, you can imagine, like, thinking about, whoa, like, you know, but the truth was, I was well able. I was well able, and I identified an area that I was so interested in, which was counselling and psychotherapy, because it helped me out so much. And so I went hammer and tongs at that from 2013, well, a 2-year full-time diploma in 2013 to 2015, and I graduated in 2015. In 2016, I wanted to go for my degree, and I was going into my 3rd year of retirement from boxing. Now, even though I was I kept up my training, I was doing a bit of training, but I wasn't like boxing or competing. I do the odd spar, help out my old coach and that, but I was never at peace. I was full of regret, and I could have, would have, should. Like, even though if you were talking to anybody, they would say I had a great career, and I kind of did as an amateur, but I wasn't happy. I wasn't able to say content with that. So I decided then, the conclusion was, look, I can always go back and do my degree, but I can't always go back and box, because you're getting older.
Yeah.
So I decided to go professional at 31 years of age, a month before my 31st birthday. And the next 7 years were just such an adventure that went by so quick, but it was incredible. 18 fights, 16 wins. And then, you know, I won the Celtic Irish and then the European, you know. But I got knocked out twice. When I stepped up to world level, just a bridge too far at that time in my life for me. But even them fights, I loved them. I loved them. I love learning from them. And even now I use them as metaphors and lessons, even for my kids and for me, you know. Sometimes in life, you can't win them all, and you have to lose to win.
Yeah.
And I know that I won my greatest fight, my last fight, because of them losses.
Yeah.
Because they taught me something.
Yeah. Brilliant. So the interest in kind of going down the counselling route and going back to education, where did it come from?
I suppose we have this innate, human beings, I believe anyway, have a innate kind of desire to self-actualize. As you know, Carl Rogers would say, from the humanistic, person-centered type of therapy, that we have a motivation, that we're driven to fulfill our potential. And in life, I think when that's disrupted, or when people are not living the life that they expect they should be living, they become distorted. And you know what I mean? Their thinking, their behaviors, their actions, like, you know, because as my old coach used to say, you can't stop the world from turning. And sure enough, as the seconds roll into minutes, into days, weeks, months, years, we must evolve with it. And it's when you stop, when you stunt yourself and you don't grow anymore, that's a bad thing, because you're regressing. So I needed to continually evolve. And I took an interest in education. There was a good friend of mine. One day he says to me, he says, Eric, this was a guy who helped me out in the early stages of when I came into recovery from addiction. And he said, to educate yourself is to respect yourself. And that was it. I just kind of took this whole new self-care attitude, respect, valuing myself. And that's why I say, like, today I feel like super strong. I rise above all that kind of, I've rose above all that kind of self sabotage, that self-consciousness, that depression, you know, that not feeling good enough, that not feeling worthy. We give ourselves a hard time, I think, human beings. We give ourselves a terrible time. Social media can do that to people too. The pressures of life. And I know life can be hard, you know, it can be very hard, but I've came through some struggles in my life, and they were the perfect conditions to prime me for life today.
Yeah.
You know?
And it's nice to think as well, one of the common things that comes up with, you know, high performance athletes, you know, when you're talking about retirement, sometimes in late 20s or retirement in your mid 30s, you don't want to think that your best years are behind you when most of life is ahead of you. So I think finding that purpose, which you've obviously done, is fantastic.
Yeah, I'm not searching anymore. You know, when I went back into professional boxing, I had to, because it was just a deep burning desire to succeed.
Was it just the feeling of unfinished business?
Yeah, it was a horrible feeling of unfinished business, and I just knew I had to do something. So when I got there, I'm happy and I'm content with that. Now I'm not searching anymore, but that doesn't mean I'm not hungry. It doesn't mean I don't want to develop and grow and learn. And I do, as a husband, as a man, as a father, as a worker, as a counselor, as a therapist, as a guest speaker. I'm always learning. I'm always trying to grow and develop, because I think that's important. And I think that's what we should do. I take a lot of risks. I love taking risks. I love putting myself into a very difficult, awkward position and trying to find my way out, or trying to adapt and grow. This is so important, I think. The worst addiction in life, as someone said, is comfortability.
Yeah.
That is an addiction we all tend to gravitate towards, but it's no good to us. It's useless. I love the grind. I love the suffering. I love the struggle. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm going off on holidays on Monday. We're going for a week. I'll be able to kick back and relax. And we need that too. But I mean, I'm not looking for this constant, long, permanent display of or vacation, let's say, of comfort. No, that doesn't interest me. I always want to be in the struggle, in the fight. It's part of it's my DNA. It's who I am.
That brings us beautifully onto the next question that I have to talk to you about, because as we were walking in here today, we mentioned Ray Goggins and your time as number 12 on Ultimate Hell Week. Tell me about that experience, because I think as a viewer watching it, I think we all put ourselves in imagine what it would be like to be in that situation with the sleep deprivation and the tasks. So for anyone that hasn't seen it, maybe you might just summarize the show and what you went through.
Well, it's portrayed as one of the most difficult, toughest special force training courses in the world. And we got to experience 1 week of it. I know it's a bit longer in real life, but we got to do a week, if you could last a week. And it was one of the best, craziest, most enjoyable things I've ever done in my life. And it was play therapy. No, to be honest, it was, I loved it. I loved everything about it. It's right up my street, that kind of stuff. But it was difficult. It was made very
more physical or mental, because obviously you've kept yourself in good shape and you're a former professional athlete. Yeah. So talk to us about the physical and the mental aspects of it.
So the physical side of it was what I relished. I loved that. But it became very difficult for me from day 2 onwards, because I developed shin splints in there. And the reason for that, because I remember getting shin splints years ago, but never in the last good few years anyway. I boxed on the 14th of May. My second last fight, was on the 14th of May, a Saturday night in Belfast. On the Sunday, the 15th of May, I went from Belfast down to Cork, top of the country to the bottom, to meet up with the rest of my recruits. And the next day, Monday the 16th, was lights, camera, action. So I had just had an 8-week training camp, a 6-round fight, got out of the ring, managed to stay relatively, healthy, no cuts, and I went. I normally take a week or 2 off after a big fight. I went into one of the most difficult military special force training courses there's been. So my body had no rest, and it gave up on me after 2. When I say gave up on me, it just kind of shut down. The shin splints were terrible. But on day 5 of the 6-day course, there was a 21-kilometer hike up a mountain, and this is where they say people fail. This is where people drop out. And I struggled to put one foot in front of the next. Every step was pain, sharp, darting pain. And let's not forget, you had 50 pounds on your back too. And a week before, I had just weighed in at 126 pounds. So it was nearly half my body weight. Couldn't walk, but I got to the top. And when I got up there, oh man, it was the most beautiful feeling. One of the greatest feelings I've ever had in my life. I'll never ever forget that. And I completed the course. I finished the whole course. They done me dirty at the end. They didn't give me the pass. I wasn't happy about that. But look,
you were just outside the time limit or something?
No, I wasn't. No. It's just up to their discretion. They kind of use dramatization, if you ask me.
Right.
But that doesn't bother me in the sense that, because I
You did the
know
full
I
week,
completed the
yeah,
course. I done everything that was in my control, and that was it. And I loved it, absolutely loved it. I loved everything about it. But yeah, definitely one of the best things, you know, I've ever done. Best experiences of my life.
Super. Talk to us a little bit about the work you're doing now.
Yeah, so I'm almost finished my degree now in counselling and psychotherapy. I'm a coach as well, so boxing coach, and not my Olympic journey and story has not been in vain. I'm a head coach of a young kid called Jude Gallagher. He's 22 years old. Been coaching him since 2018. And Jude is part of our family now. He's from Tyrone, but he'd come down and stay with us, with me and my wife Laura, and in our house in Drogheda. And I'm delighted to say that only last month Jude Gallagher qualified for the Olympic Games for Paris.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So, you know, I'm just so grateful and proud that I was able to just help him on his journey. But he's a good one. Jude is good. He's going to light up the Olympic Games. I really believe that. So I'm coaching. As I say, I'm a therapist. I'm a guest speaker as well. I'm a guest speaker for Leia Healthcare. I do a lot of work in the industry, in the corporate world, and and schools as well. I go into a lot of schools and things like that. I live a very flexible lifestyle. You know, most importantly, like my favorite jobs is being a father. You know, being a husband, and that's where it's at for me. That's where real life is at for me. And I think the more I can lean on what's important in my life, put my energy and my focus into what's pure and real in my life. And what's pure and real is my family, you know, my wife, my close friends. And that's the most important thing. Try not to lose sight of that. But other than that, I just keep going. I'm enjoying life. I should say I'm running in the local elections.
Yeah.
So I'm running in the local elections come June 7th. I'm running for Sinn Féin in the Drogheda rural constituency. So that's someone said to me, retired from boxing, you're going into a much tougher fight now into the politics world. And I know politics can be toxic at the moment and that, but you know,
what motivated you to do that?
I was asked would I consider it, and I said I would, and I had to think about it, and I started to think about my community where I live in Tullyellen now in Drogheda. It's a rural community, and
how far outside Drogheda are you?
That's only about 6 or 7 kilometres outside the town. I kind of do. Would you believe it? Don't I actually do a lot of representative work anyway, community work. You know, I turn up at different events, and you know, I'd speak at different events or, you know, webinars, stuff like that. I speak at schools, and I kind of, in some ways, I'm an unofficial kind of a representative or a community representative. And, you know, I was thinking about, you know, maybe I could do this on an official capacity. I think it's a very difficult world that we live in right now. The costs of living, the housing situation is scandalous. It really is scandalous. And, you know, the homeless, like I grew up in the 80s and 90s. We didn't have much, right? But neither did anybody else. And I tell you the truth, nobody was homeless. Do you know what I mean? So nobody's homeless. So now we're one of the most wealthiest countries in the world with record homelessness, record hospital waits.
Yeah, there's a real disconnect there. Yeah,
it's not. It's broken. So hopefully, like, you know, if people can start looking at, you know, prioritizing and looking after their own, and I'll represent my community with honesty and integrity. I know I will, and so that's what I'm doing. And actually, believe it or not, while I have the space here, I'm going to skip every kilometre of the Drogheda 10K on Sunday the 5th of May for Drogheda Homeless Aid, and they have 29 beds, always full, and have a waiting list always packed as well. And
so you're skipping 10K.
I'm going to skip, yeah. I'm good at skipping and I'm good at running, but I've never combined both. So I'm going to do it. But look,
that is a brilliant challenge, isn't it?
I think today people are struggling. It's not like, you know, struggling in many ways. Financially, a big one. But like, if people are going to put their hands in their pocket for you, for a very worthy cause, you have to be doing something that's going to be, you know, challenging enough to make people want to give. That's why I'm doing it.
Yeah, and you got to do something different to make it
crazy, as you could
crazy,
imagine.
Definitely. But I think we're all a bit that way. But it's a positive thing to do, and just for anybody that wants to support that, we will add what's your Instagram, and we'll add it to the show notes.
Instagram, Eric Donovan Box. Yeah, so the link and all will be on me. So I'd be grateful if you did that. I'd be very thankful for that. Yeah, thank you.
No, we will indeed. Listen, you have a brilliant story, and it's, as you said, it's a story about hope and redemption and new chapters and supporting the people around you. And I think it's a really powerful message. So thank you very much for coming in.
Pleasure.
If you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe to our YouTube, follow us on Instagram. It's at talentmatters_podcast. We'll put all the links to Eric's socials and his skip run 10K in Drogheda into the show notes, and we'll see you next time.